February 16th, 1945. 11,000 feet above the Japanese home islands. Lieutenant Patrick Fleming's gloved hand tightened on the control stick of his Grumman F6F Hellcat as the radio crackled with the fighter director's voice. Bogies inbound, numerous contacts. All fighters engage. Below him, through breaks in the cloud deck, Fleming could see the snow-dusted fields surrounding Mobara airfield. Somewhere down there, Japanese pilots were scrambling to defend their homeland. And somewhere in Fleming's mind, a memory flickered himself at 17, pumping gasoline at a Montgomery filling station under the Alabama sun, saving nickels and dimes for flying lessons he couldn't afford. That boy could never have imagined this moment. A United States Navy fighter ace, leading a division of Hellcats in a fighter sweep over Japan itself. What happened next would violate no rules. Patrick Fleming followed his training precisely. But the ferocity, the relentlessness, the almost mechanical efficiency with which he destroyed 5 Japanese fighters in a single afternoon would leave his squadron mates shaking their heads in amazement. And tomorrow he would do it again. 4 more kills. 9 enemy aircraft were destroyed in 48 hours. Not through luck, not through some supernatural talent, but through a combination of excellent training, a devastatingly effective aircraft, and the quiet determination of a working man who had spent his youth repositioning, arresting hooks on carrier decks, while other officers flew the planes he could only dream of piloting. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The story of Patrick Fleming reveals a truth the American military establishment discovered repeatedly during World War II. The best warriors don't always come from military academies or privileged backgrounds. Sometimes they emerge from filling stations and destroyer decks. Sometimes the most lethal fighter pilot in a squadron is the enlisted man who spent years watching officers fly while he manually cranked arresting gear. Sometimes greatness requires not just opportunity, but hunger. Patrick Dawson Fleming was born on January 17, 1918, in a world where military aviation remained the exclusive domain of officers and gentlemen. His father, Major Percy Fleming, served in the United States Army, which meant young Patrick grew up in the transient world of military posts and temporary quarters. The family lived at Fort Stotzenburg in the Philippines, 45 miles northwest of Manila, where Patrick attended the base school alongside other officers' children. Fort Stotzenburg represented America's colonial presence in the Philippines, established in 1909 and named for Colonel John M. Stotzenburg, who died during the Philippine-American War. The post housed artillery units, cavalry squadrons, and support elements of the Philippine Department. The climate was tropical. The lifestyle was structured. The hierarchy was absolute. Officers' children attended better schools, lived in better quarters, and enjoyed privileges that enlisted families never received. Patrick Fleming absorbed these lessons about class and opportunity. He understood from childhood that in the military world, some doors opened automatically for officers' sons while remaining permanently closed to others. But he also developed something else during those Philippine years, an obsession with flight. The Army Air Corps maintained a small detachment at nearby Clark Field. Fleming watched biplanes take off and land. He studied their movements. He dreamed of flying. When the Fleming family relocated to Montgomery, Alabama, Patrick attended Lanier High School. He was bright enough, athletic enough, but showed no particular distinction. What he showed was determination. While other boys spent their evenings at social events or sports, Patrick Fleming worked night shifts at a filling station. The work was unglamorous, pumping gasoline, checking oil, cleaning windshields, collecting payment. Hour after hour under fluorescent lights, serving customers who barely acknowledged his existence. Every dollar he earned went toward a single goal: flying lessons. Commercial flight instruction cost money that working-class families simply didn't have. But Fleming saved obsessively, a few dollars from each paycheck, gradually accumulating enough to pay for hours in the air. The instructors at the local airfield had seen hundreds of dreamers who wanted to fly. Most washed out. Most discovered that natural ability mattered far more than enthusiasm. Patrick Fleming possessed both. He soloed quickly. The instructors noticed immediately that this kid had something. Smooth hands on the controls, excellent spatial awareness, natural feel for the aircraft. He wasn't just flying. He was thinking ahead of the airplane, anticipating what it would do before it did it. The hours accumulated slowly because money was scarce, but Fleming progressed steadily through the training curriculum. In 1935, at age 17, Fleming made a decision that would define his life. He enlisted in the United States Navy as a seaman, not as an officer candidate, not through the Naval Academy. As an enlisted man, the lowest rank, the decision reflected practical calculation rather than idealism. Fleming wanted to fly. The Navy had aircraft. Enlisting gave him proximity to aviation even if it didn't give him a cockpit. The Navy assigned Seaman Fleming to the destroyer USS Hull, a Farragut-class vessel commissioned in 1934. Destroyer duty meant hard work, long watches, endless maintenance. Fleming learned seamanship, navigation, damage control skills that would prove invaluable years later. But the destroyers didn't have aircraft. Fleming needed to get closer to aviation. He applied for transfer to the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga. The transfer came through in 1936. Saratoga was one of the Navy's first purpose-built fleet carriers, a 33,000-ton vessel that operated 80 aircraft. Fleming reported aboard as a second-class seaman and received assignment to the flight deck crew. His specific job was repositioning the arresting hooks of aircraft after they landed. Every carrier landing involved arresting gear. The tailhook of incoming aircraft caught one of several steel cables stretched across the flight deck. The cable, attached to hydraulic systems below deck, absorbed the aircraft's momentum and brought it to a controlled stop. After each landing, deck crews had to manually reset the arresting wires and hooks before the next aircraft could land. The work was dangerous, exhausting, and repetitive. Flight operations continued from dawn to dusk. Aircraft landed every few minutes during intensive training periods. Fleming and his fellow sailors worked in constant motion, dodging propellers, breathing exhaust fumes, resetting gear under time pressure, because the next plane was already in the landing pattern. But Fleming was exactly where he wanted to be. Surrounded by aircraft, watching pilots land, observing techniques, learning which approaches worked and which created problems. He saw smooth landings and hard crashes. He watched experienced aviators and he watched frightened nuggets. He absorbed everything. Fleming had one additional advantage beyond work ethic and natural ability: an engaging personality. While many enlisted men remained intimidated by officers, Fleming possessed enough confidence and charm to interact with them directly. He made his ambitions known. He wanted to fly. He wanted to attend the Naval Academy. He needed sponsorship. The commanding officer of Saratoga during Fleming's time aboard was Captain William Frederick Halsey, Jr., the future fleet admiral, the man who would command massive carrier task forces across the Pacific. The aggressive tactician who believed in hitting hard and hitting first, Halsey recognized something in the young enlisted man who repositioned arresting hooks while dreaming of flying. Halsey provided the recommendation Fleming needed. Entry to the Naval Academy required congressional nomination or service academy appointment. Enlisted personnel with strong recommendations from senior officers could attend the Naval Academy Preparatory School as a pathway to the academy itself. Fleming received orders to the prep school in Norfolk, Virginia. He entered the Naval Academy on July 8, 1937. He was 20 years old, older than most incoming plebes, with 4 years of enlisted service behind him. The academy curriculum emphasized engineering, navigation, seamanship, leadership, and military discipline. Fleming performed adequately but not exceptionally. He was competent rather than brilliant, determined rather than inspired. The war in Europe erupted during his time at Annapolis. Germany invaded Poland in September 1939. France fell in June 1940. Britain fought alone. Japan expanded aggressively through Asia. The Naval Academy accelerated its curriculum in response to the global crisis. Fleming's class graduated early, on February 7, 1941, commissioned as ensigns in the United States Navy. Fleming was 23 years old. He had achieved what seemed impossible 8 years earlier when he pumped gasoline in Montgomery. He was a commissioned naval officer. The Navy assigned Ensign Fleming to the light cruiser USS Cincinnati. The ship was part of neutrality patrol operations in the Caribbean and Atlantic, monitoring French warships in the West Indies and searching for German blockade runners. The duty was important, but not glamorous. Fleming performed well. He demonstrated competence in ship handling and navigation, but he still wasn't flying. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack transformed everything. The United States was at war. The Navy needed pilots desperately. Fleming immediately applied for flight training. His application emphasized his previous flight experience from those expensive lessons in Alabama, his time on Saratoga observing carrier operations, and his determination to serve in naval aviation. The application was approved. In November 1942, after completing his tour in Cincinnati, Fleming received orders to Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida, the Navy's primary flight training facility. He entered the pipeline that would transform competent naval officers into carrier-qualified aviators. Naval aviator training in 1942 was systematic and thorough. Primary training taught basic flight skills in simple aircraft. Intermediate training introduced more powerful planes and advanced maneuvers. Advanced training focused on carrier qualifications, formation flying, gunnery, and combat tactics. The curriculum was designed to produce pilots who could operate effectively from carriers under combat conditions. Fleming progressed through the training without difficulty. The hours he had accumulated years earlier in Alabama, combined with his experience observing carrier operations on Saratoga, gave him advantages over other students. He understood naval aviation from both the flight deck perspective and the cockpit perspective. He knew what deck crews needed from pilots. He understood carrier landing patterns from watching thousands of approaches. He earned his Wings of Gold in March 1943. He was officially designated a naval aviator. He was 25 years old. The journey from filling station to fighter pilot had taken 8 years of relentless determination, but Fleming still hadn't entered combat. The Navy sent him to Naval Air Station Quonset Point in Rhode Island for night fighter training. Night fighting represented the cutting edge of naval aviation. Flying and fighting in darkness required exceptional instrument skills, precise navigation, and absolute confidence in your aircraft and your training. The curriculum was demanding and the washout rate was high. While at Quonset Point, Fleming met Neville Bartlett, daughter of retired Navy Commander Owen Bartlett. They married shortly thereafter. Fleming completed night fighter training in November 1943 and received orders to Naval Air Station Atlantic City to serve as a flight instructor while awaiting assignment to an operational squadron. He spent months training other pilots. Competent work, but frustrating. The war was being won in the Pacific by pilots flying from carriers. Fleming was teaching basic skills in New Jersey. The assignment came through in February 1944. Fighting Squadron 80, VF-80, was commissioned under the command of Lieutenant Commander Albert O. Vorse, Jr. The squadron would be equipped with the Grumman F6F Hellcat, the Navy's premier carrier fighter. They would be assigned to USS Ticonderoga, one of the new Essex-class fleet carriers that were joining the Pacific Fleet in increasing numbers. Fleming reported to VF-80 as a junior pilot. He had no combat experience. He had logged hundreds of training hours but had never faced an enemy aircraft. He had watched the war from training squadrons and instructor billets, while other pilots earned combat decorations. VF-80 worked up at Naval Air Station Atlantic City through the spring and summer of 1944. The pilots flew formation drills, gunnery exercises, carrier qualification aboard training carriers on the Great Lakes, and tactics development. They learned to fly the Hellcat, to fight as a unit, to coordinate with other aircraft types. By September 1944, VF-80 was ready for combat. The squadron flew to the West Coast and embarked on USS Ticonderoga at Naval Air Station Alameda in California. The carrier departed for Pearl Harbor, then continued west to the combat zone. The journey gave the pilots time to absorb what they were about to experience: the casualty rates, the intensity, the relentlessness. Veterans from earlier campaigns briefed the new pilots on Japanese tactics, on survival techniques, on what worked and what got you killed. USS Ticonderoga joined Task Force 38 in the Western Pacific in early November 1944. The fast carrier task force represented American naval power at its peak, multiple carrier groups operating in coordination, launching hundreds of aircraft in coordinated strikes, maintaining continuous combat air patrols, supporting amphibious operations. The Japanese Navy was shattered but not defeated. Japanese land-based aircraft remained dangerous. Kamikaze attacks were beginning. Every mission carried real risk. VF-80 entered combat on November 5, 1944. The target was Japanese shipping and airfields around Manila Bay in the Philippines. American forces had landed at Leyte Gulf 2 weeks earlier. MacArthur had returned. The campaign to liberate the Philippines was underway. The carriers provided air support, attacking Japanese reinforcements and defending American forces from air attack. Fleming flew his first combat mission that morning. His Division 4 Hellcats, flying in coordinated formation, launched from Ticonderoga at 0600 hours. They climbed to altitude, formed up with other aircraft, and proceeded to the target area. The mission called for rocket attacks on Japanese shipping, followed by strafing runs on targets of opportunity. The division attacked shipping in Manila Bay. Fleming fired his rockets, felt the Hellcat shudder as the projectiles released, watched them streak downward toward a cargo vessel. Whether they hit or missed was impossible to determine from altitude. The attack completed, the division climbed away and began searching for additional targets. Then Fleming spotted it, a single Mitsubishi, a 6M0 fighter. The Japanese pilot had probably launched from Clark Field to intercept American attackers. He was alone, climbing, searching for targets. He had altitude advantage on Fleming's division, but the Americans had numbers, 4 against 1, the mathematics of aerial combat. Fleming called out the contact. His division leader acknowledged. But Fleming didn't wait for coordinated attack. Something in him, the same impatience that had driven him from filling stations to carrier decks, pushed him to act. He broke formation and dove after the Zero. The Japanese pilot saw him coming. The Zero rolled and dove for the deck, trying to use its superior maneuverability to escape. But Fleming had trained for exactly this scenario. The Hellcat was heavier, more powerful. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower. The Zero's Sake engine produced barely 1,000. In a dive, the Hellcat had an overwhelming advantage. Fleming closed rapidly. The Zero tried to turn, to force the Hellcat into a turning dogfight where Japanese maneuverability would prevail. Fleming didn't fall for it. He stayed behind and above, maintaining energy, waiting for the shot. The Zero's dive angle steepened. The pilot was getting desperate, diving toward the water. Fleming followed. At 200 yards, Fleming pressed the firing button. 650 caliber Browning machine guns erupted simultaneously. The Hellcat shuddered from recoil. Tracers reached out toward the Zero. The first burst missed slightly left. Fleming adjusted. The second burst walked across the Zero's fuselage and wing route. Pieces tore away from the Japanese fighter. Smoke started streaming. The Zero rolled right and went straight into the water. Fleming's first kill, his first combat mission. The fighter pilot, who had spent 8 years working toward this moment, had just destroyed an enemy aircraft. He pulled up hard, scanning the sky for threats, checking his fuel, orienting himself. The division reformed. They returned to Ticonderoga without further incident. When Fleming landed and climbed down from his Hellcat, the adrenaline was still surging. The deck crews congratulated him. His squadron mates gathered to hear the details. The intelligence officer debriefed him carefully, noting the time, location, and circumstances of the kill. The gun camera footage would be reviewed later to confirm the victory. One kill didn't make Fleming an ace. You needed 5 confirmed victories for ace status, but it proved something essential. He could fight. He could kill. The boy from Montgomery who pumped gasoline, the enlisted sailor who repositioned arresting hooks, the junior officer who spent years in training command, he could do this. The next day, November 6th, VF-80 flew additional missions over Manila. Fleming participated but made no additional contact with enemy aircraft. The missions were successful, shipping destroyed, airfields attacked, but individual combat was often a matter of being in the right place at the right time. The following weeks brought more missions but few opportunities for aerial combat. Japanese forces in the Philippines were being overwhelmed. Air opposition was decreasing. American fighters swept the skies, largely unopposed. Fleming flew routine missions. He bombed, he strafed, he escorted bombers, competent work, professional execution, but no additional kills. Then came November 25th. The mission called for a 2-plane communication relay over the Philippine Islands. Fleming led his wingman to the assigned position. Their role was to maintain radio contact between strike aircraft and the carrier, extending the range of communication. It was not a glamorous duty. It was not typically dangerous. They would orbit at altitude, monitor frequencies, and relay messages. Then Fleming spotted them. A formation of 5 Japanese fighters. Exact type uncertain at distance, probably Zeros or Oscars. They were flying below Fleming's altitude, apparently unaware of the 2 Hellcats above them. Fleming had multiple choices. He could report the enemy aircraft and vector other friendlies to intercept. He could maintain his position and continue the communication relay mission. He could shadow the Japanese and wait for reinforcements. Fleming made a different choice. He attacked immediately, 5 enemy aircraft against 2 American fighters. The mathematics suggested caution. Fleming ignored mathematics. He rolled into a dive, building speed, positioning for an overhead attack. His wingman followed, probably wondering if their division leader had lost his mind. The Japanese never saw them until it was too late. Fleming opened fire at close range on the trailing fighter. The Japanese aircraft exploded. Fleming pulled through, acquired a second target, fired again. That fighter also went down, 2 kills in seconds. The remaining 3 Japanese fighters scattered. The element of surprise was gone. Now it was 3 against 2, and the enemy was alert. Fleming went after a 3rd aircraft. The Japanese pilot tried to turn the fight, tried to use his superior maneuverability. Fleming stayed patient, maintained energy, and waited for position. When the shot presented itself, he took it. 3rd kill. The remaining 2 Japanese fighters fled. Fleming and his wingman returned to their communication relay station as if nothing unusual had happened. 3 kills. Fleming was now credited with 4 total victories. 1 more, and he would be an ace. The squadron intelligence officer noted in his report that Lieutenant Fleming had demonstrated exceptional aggression and gunnery skill. 5 enemy aircraft engaged, 2 American fighters, 3 confirmed kills, 0 damage to friendly aircraft. The mathematics worked when execution was perfect. December opened with bad weather, low cloud decks, rain, poor visibility. Combat operations continued, but opportunities for air-to-air combat were limited. Then came December 14th. The fast carriers were supporting American landings at Mindoro in the Philippines, scheduled for December 15th. The mission for December 14th called for fighter sweeps Hellcats hunting enemy aircraft before they could interfere with the amphibious operations. VF-80 launched 2 divisions, 8 Hellcats total. Fleming led 1 division. The Hellcats cruised at 9,000 feet, searching for targets. Intelligence had reported Japanese reinforcements flying south from Luzon. If they could intercept those reinforcements before they reached Mindoro, they could eliminate the threat before it developed. Then they spotted them. Not a small formation, not a few aircraft. A gaggle of approximately 27 Japanese fighters, Zeros and Nakajima Ki 43 Oscars mixed together flying in loose formation at lower altitude. They were heading south, exactly what intelligence had predicted. But the numbers were daunting. 8 American fighters against 27 Japanese, more than 3-to-1 odds. Fleming's division leader made the decision instantly. Attack. The element of surprise was absolute. The Japanese were flying in loose formation, not tactical formation. They were cruising, not expecting contact. Their airspeed was low. They were vulnerable. The 8 Hellcats dove as a unit. Fleming selected targets. The Japanese finally saw them. Too late. The Americans had altitude, speed, position, everything favored them. Fleming opened fire on the first Zero. It exploded. He pulled through, acquired another target. Second kill. The sky erupted into chaos. 27 Japanese fighters trying to react. 8 American fighters pressed the attack with savage intensity. Zeros rolled and dove. Oscars tried to climb. Some Japanese pilots bailed out rather than fight. The Americans worked through them methodically. Fleming destroyed a third aircraft, then a fourth. His division mates were scoring simultaneously. The radios were filled with calls. Scratch 1, tally 2 more, clearing 6 o'clock. The engagement lasted perhaps 5 minutes. Then it was over. The surviving Japanese scattered and fled. The 8 Hellcats reformed and conducted a head count. All present. Not a single bullet hole in any American aircraft. They had ambushed 27 enemy fighters and emerged completely unscathed. The squadron intelligence officer's report documented 19 confirmed kills. Robert Anderson scored 5. Fleming scored 4. Richard Cormier scored 3. The others divided the remaining 7. It was one of the most lopsided air victories in the Pacific War. 8 against 27, 19 kills. 0 losses, 0 damage. Fleming now had 8 confirmed victories. He was an ace twice over. His combat career was 6 weeks old. He had flown perhaps 20 missions. The progression from his first kill on November 5th to 8 kills on December 14th suggested a pilot who was not just competent but exceptional. What made Fleming deadly was not superior aircraft. All the pilots in VF-80 flew identical Hellcats. It was not superior tactics. They all received the same training. It was something else. Aggressiveness combined with patience, willingness to press attacks while maintaining discipline, perfect gunnery combined with situational awareness, the ability to kill quickly, efficiently, without wasting ammunition, while simultaneously tracking threats and maintaining formation awareness. The squadron mates who flew with Fleming noticed these qualities. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't reckless, he simply executed textbook attacks with mechanical precision. When he fired, enemy aircraft died. He didn't chase kills. He created opportunities and exploited them. The fast carriers continued operations through late December. VF-80 flew additional missions. Fleming participated but made no additional contact. The tempo was relentless. Launch before, dawn, fly multiple missions, land after dark, sleep, repeat. The physical exhaustion was overwhelming, but the mission continued. December faded into January 1945. The fast carriers repositioned for strikes against Formosa, the large island north of the Philippines that Japan had controlled since 1895. Formosa represented a major staging base for Japanese air power. Airfields dotted the island. Japanese aircraft used Formosa to reinforce operations in the Philippines and to threaten American naval forces. January 3, 1945. The weather over Formosa was terrible. Thick fronts, heavy cloud cover, limited visibility. Most strike groups couldn't penetrate to their targets. Those that did fly through the weather on instruments, blind, hoping to break out over the objective. VF-80 launched 3 divisions, 12 Hellcats to sweep the area searching for airborne targets. Fleming flew as part of the formation. They climbed through the soup, breaking out above the clouds at 12,000 feet. Below them was solid overcast. Navigation was by dead reckoning. They couldn't see the ground. They couldn't see landmarks. They flew headings based on time and airspeed calculations, hoping their navigation was accurate. Then they spotted aircraft. Japanese fighters below them, visible through breaks in the clouds. The enemy was also navigating blind, also hoping to find targets. The Americans had altitude and position. Fleming's division dove through a hole in the clouds. The engagement was sharp and brutal. Fleming destroyed one aircraft immediately. Then a second. The Japanese tried to escape into the clouds. Fleming followed one down through the overcast, emerging at low altitude over the Formosan coastline. He caught the Japanese fighter and destroyed it. Third kill of the mission. Fleming pulled up hard, climbed back through the clouds, and rejoined his division. They returned to Ticonderoga, having scored multiple victories in terrible weather conditions. Fleming now had 11 confirmed kills. The intelligence officer noted that Lieutenant Fleming had demonstrated exceptional navigation and instrument skills, in addition to his proven combat abilities. But January 3rd also brought tragedy. While VF-80 was scoring victories over Formosa, Japanese kamikaze aircraft attacked the American carrier task force. USS Ticonderoga was hit. A Zero loaded with bombs crashed into the carrier's forward section. The explosion and fire killed dozens of sailors and destroyed multiple aircraft. Damage control teams fought the blaze for hours. The carrier's operations were severely disrupted. When Fleming and his squadron mates returned from their mission, they found their ship damaged and burning. Many landed on other carriers because Ticonderoga's flight deck was unusable. The squadron spent days scattered across the task force, while their home carrier underwent emergency repairs. Fleming witnessed something during the kamikaze attack that would shape his actions weeks later. When the Zero hit Ticonderoga, some of the anti-aircraft gun crews were killed or wounded. Surviving sailors immediately manned the guns to continue defending the ship. Officers and pilots who weren't flying grabbed weapons and joined the fight. The carrier was under attack. Everyone capable of fighting fought. Fleming remembered that. The distinction between pilot and sailor didn't matter when your ship was dying. You did whatever the situation required. Ticonderoga limped back to Ulithi Atoll for temporary repairs. The damage was serious but not catastrophic. The carrier could continue operations after emergency fixes. While the ship was being patched, the Navy made an organizational change that would affect VF-80 directly. The composition of carrier air groups was changing. The kamikaze threat required many more fighters for combat air patrol and defensive operations. To accommodate this, existing fighter squadrons were split into two separate units, fighter squadrons and fighter-bomber squadrons. Same aircraft, same pilots, different designations and slightly different missions. On January 10, 1945, VF-80 officially split. The original squadron retained the VF-80 designation. The new unit became VBF-80 Bomber Fighting Squadron 80. Lieutenant Patrick Fleming was named Executive Officer of VBF-80, second in command of the new squadron. The promotion reflected his combat record, 11 confirmed kills in 2 months. Aggressive but disciplined, excellent leader. The Navy recognized that Fleming possessed the qualities needed to lead other pilots in combat. He was 26 years old. He had been in combat for 9 weeks. He was already a seasoned veteran. Ticonderoga completed emergency repairs and rejoined the fast carrier task force. The mission tempo increased. The carriers were preparing for the ultimate objective strikes on the Japanese home islands themselves, Tokyo, the heart of the enemy empire. American carrier aircraft had never attacked Japan's capital. The audacity of the operation was breathtaking. Late January and early February brought intensive operations. VBF-80 flew strikes against Formosa, Okinawa, the Ryukyu Islands. Fleming led missions, coordinated attacks, and continued building his score. He destroyed additional aircraft on the ground during strafing runs. But aerial combat opportunities were decreasing. Japanese air power was being systematically destroyed. Fewer enemy aircraft meant fewer chances for air-to-air victories. Then came February 16, 1945. The fast carriers launched the first strikes against the Tokyo area. The weather was clear, visibility unlimited. American intelligence estimated significant Japanese fighter strength defending the home islands. This would not be an unopposed raid. VBF-80 launched at dawn as part of a fighter sweep. Their mission was to arrive ahead of the main strike force, engage, defending fighters, and clear the air over target areas. Fleming led a division of 9 Hellcats. They climbed to altitude, formed up, and set course for Japan. The flight took over an hour. The Hellcats cruised at maximum range power settings to conserve fuel. Below them was the Pacific Ocean, empty and blue. Ahead was Japan, the enemy's home, the place where this war had started 3 years earlier. They made landfall on the eastern coast. Mountains rose from the sea. Snow covered the higher peaks. The landscape was beautiful and deadly. Somewhere down there were millions of Japanese who wanted them dead. Somewhere down there were fighter aircraft preparing to intercept. Fleming's division proceeded to their assigned target area, Mobara Airfield, northeast of Tokyo. They descended to attack altitude, armed their weapons, and prepared for combat. The first target was the airfield itself, strafing runs to destroy aircraft on the ground and suppress anti-aircraft defenses. The division dove on Mobara. Fleming pickled his ordnance rockets streaking toward hangars and parked aircraft. Explosions erupted across the airfield. Secondary detonations suggested fuel and ammunition had been hit. The Hellcats pulled up, reformed, and prepared for a second pass. Then Fleming spotted them, 4 Zeros climbing from the airfield, Japanese pilots scrambling to defend their base. The mathematics were favorable. 9 Hellcats against 4 Zeros. But these were experienced Japanese pilots defending their homeland. They would fight with desperate intensity. Fleming called out the contact. His division jettisoned external stores, bombs and rockets dropped away to reduce weight and drag. The Hellcats were now pure fighters. Light, fast, lethal. They climbed to engage. The Zeros split into 2 elements. 2 fighters turned south, 2 turned inland. Classic defensive split designed to force the attackers to divide their forces. Fleming and his wingman pursued the 2 heading south. The rest of his division went after the other pair. The chase developed at low altitude over the Japanese countryside. Fields and villages flashed below. The Zeros were twisting, turning, trying to force the Hellcats into turning dogfights. Fleming stayed patient. He maintained energy. He waited for a position. The first Zero made a mistake. The pilot pulled into a climbing turn, bleeding speed. Fleming closed instantly. At 100 yards he opened fire. The Zero exploded. Fleming pulled through the debris, acquired the second Zero, and fired again. Another kill. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Fleming's wingman had destroyed one of the original 4. The rest of the division had eliminated the other pair and engaged additional Japanese fighters that had launched from nearby airfields. The radio net was filled with combat calls. Fleming climbed back to altitude, scanning for additional targets. Below him, he spotted a group of 6 antiquated Nakajima Ki 27 Nate fighters. The Nate was obsolete before Pearl Harbor. Fixed landing gear, low speed, minimal armament. They stood no chance against the Hellcats, but Japanese commanders were throwing everything available into the air to defend against the American attack. If Nates were all they had, Nates would fight. Fleming dove on them. The Japanese pilots saw him coming and scattered. Fleming selected the nearest target and destroyed it. Then a second, then a third, then a fourth. 4 Nates destroyed in perhaps 90 seconds. The remaining 2 fled at wave-top altitude, desperate to escape. Fleming let them go. His ammunition was running low and more important targets might appear. He climbed back to altitude and checked in with his division. All aircraft present, no damage, multiple confirmed kills. They had swept the area clean of enemy fighters. The main strike force could proceed to their targets without aerial opposition. But Fleming's mission wasn't over. While orbiting the target area, he spotted another formation of Japanese fighters approaching from the west. Fresh defenders scrambling to intercept American aircraft. Fleming's division was low on ammunition and fuel, but they were the only American fighters in position to intercept. Fleming led his division into the attack. The Japanese formation included a mix of fighters, Zeros, and more modern aircraft. The engagement was sharp. Fleming destroyed one more enemy fighter, his fifth kill of the mission, before his guns ran dry. 4,500 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition expended, every gun empty. The division broke off and headed for the rendezvous point. They had been in combat for over an hour. Fuel was critical. They needed to find the carrier and land before their tanks ran dry. The flight back seemed to take forever. Fleming monitored his fuel gauge, the needle dropping steadily toward empty. The mathematics of naval aviation were unforgiving. Run out of fuel over water and you were swimming, assuming you survived the ditching. Ticonderoga appeared ahead, the most beautiful sight in the world to a fighter pilot low on fuel. Fleming entered the landing pattern, extended his landing gear and flaps, and rolled into the groove. The landing signal officer guided him down. Perfect approach, perfect lineup. Tailhook caught the wire. Fleming was home. He climbed down from his Hellcat exhausted. The deck crews swarmed over the aircraft, checking for damage, refueling, rearming. The intelligence officer was waiting with his clipboard and camera. 5 confirmed kills, 4 nates and 1 0. Fleming's total was now 16 victories. He was one of the highest-scoring active fighter pilots in the Navy. But tomorrow was February 17th, and tomorrow Fleming would do it again. The carrier task force was repositioned overnight. Multiple carrier groups were hitting different areas of Japan simultaneously. The goal was to overwhelm Japanese defenses through sheer weight of numbers. Launch so many aircraft that Japanese fighters couldn't engage them all. Destroy so many targets that Japanese industry couldn't function. February 17th, 1945. VBF-80 launched before dawn for another fighter sweep over the home islands. Fleming led 10 Hellcats this time. The target areas were the same general region as yesterday airfields northeast of Tokyo. The mission was the same: destroy enemy aircraft in the air and on the ground. The flight to the coast was routine. The Hellcats cruised at altitude, conserving fuel, maintaining formation. Japan appeared ahead. Mountains, snow, enemy territory. Fleming led his formation toward their assigned targets. They found the first enemy aircraft near Koryu Airfield, a small formation of Japanese fighters on patrol. Fleming's division attacked immediately. The engagement was brief and one-sided. Fleming destroyed one enemy aircraft. His wingmen destroyed another. The survivors fled. The Hellcats proceeded to strafe Koryu Airfield. Multiple aircraft were parked in revetments around the field. Fleming made repeated strafing runs, destroying aircraft on the ground, suppressing anti-aircraft fire. Explosions and fires marked successful hits. Then, more Japanese fighters appeared, reinforcements scrambling from nearby fields. Fleming's division engaged them over the airfield. The combat was intense. Japanese pilots were defending their homeland. They fought with desperate courage. But American training, American aircraft, and American numbers prevailed. Fleming destroyed 2 more aircraft in the swirling dogfight over Koryu. His gunnery was mechanical in its precision. Acquire target, close range, fire short burst, target destroyed, move to next target. No wasted motion, no wasted ammunition. Pure efficiency. The division continued to Shinchiku Airfield. More targets on the ground, more Japanese fighters in the air. Fleming destroyed 1 more enemy aircraft before his ammunition ran low. 4 kills on February 17th. Combined with 5 kills on February 16th, Fleming had destroyed 9 enemy aircraft in 48 hours. The mission had lasted over 4 hours. Fleming was physically and mentally exhausted when he landed back on Ticonderoga. The intelligence officer debriefed him carefully. 4 confirmed kills, multiple ground targets destroyed. No damage to his aircraft. Another perfect mission. Fleming's confirmed total was now 19 victories, 10 with VF-80, 9 with VBF-80. He was tied for 4th place among all Navy aces of World War II. Only 3 pilots had scored more aerial victories, and Fleming had achieved his record in just 6 combat missions, spanning 3.5 months. The numbers were extraordinary, but they didn't capture the full story. Fleming had flown dozens of missions where he made no contact with enemy aircraft. He had led formations, coordinated attacks, supported ground forces, and escorted bombers. The 19 kills represented a tiny fraction of his total combat flying, but they demonstrated what made him exceptional: the ability to exploit opportunities when they appeared. What separated Fleming from other pilots wasn't superhuman skill. The Hellcat itself was a war-winning weapon. The F6F5 model Fleming flew represented American industrial and engineering excellence. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine was reliable and powerful. The 650 caliber machine guns provided devastating firepower. The armored cockpit and self-sealing fuel tanks protected the pilot. The wide-track landing gear made carrier landings safer. Every aspect of the Hellcat was designed for one purpose: killing enemy aircraft while keeping American pilots alive. The F6F Hellcat entered service in September 1943. Over the following 2 years, Navy and Marine Hellcat pilots would be credited with destroying 5,163 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, while losing only 270 Hellcats in air-to-air engagements. The kill ratio was 19-1. For every Hellcat lost in aerial combat, American pilots destroyed 19 enemy aircraft. That ratio wasn't luck. It was a systematic advantage. American pilots received over 500 hours of flight training before entering combat. Japanese pilots by 1945 received as little as 40 hours. American aircraft had superior high-altitude performance, superior dive speed, superior firepower. American logistics ensured that damaged aircraft were repaired quickly and lost aircraft were replaced immediately. American carrier task forces operated with overwhelming numerical superiority. Patrick Fleming succeeded not because he was unique, but because he operated within a system designed to produce success. The system trained him thoroughly. The system equipped him excellently. The system supported him completely. His individual skill and aggression exploited those advantages to maximum effect. But February 17, 1945, was Fleming's last aerial combat. VBF-80 continued flying missions through the end of February, but encountered no additional enemy aircraft in the air. Japanese air power over the home islands was being systematically destroyed. American fighters dominated Japanese airspace. The mission changed from air superiority to ground attack. Fleming led strafing missions. He bombed Japanese installations. He provided close air support for planned invasion forces. But the opportunities for aerial combat that had produced 19 kills in 3 months simply disappeared. Japanese fighters stayed on the ground or launched only when absolutely necessary. The mathematical advantage that had favored Fleming, excellent aircraft, excellent training, overwhelming numbers, now manifested as air superiority so complete that the enemy refused to fight. In early March 1945, Ticonderoga was rotated back to the United States for maintenance and refit. VBF-80 was relieved by a fresh squadron. Fleming and his squadron mates flew their Hellcats off the carrier for the last time. The combat tour was over. They had survived. Fleming returned to the United States as the 4th-ranking Navy ace of World War II. 19 confirmed victories in 6 sorties. The concentration of success was almost unprecedented. Most aces accumulated their scores over dozens or hundreds of missions spanning months or years. Fleming had achieved ace status and far beyond in less than 4 months of combat. The Navy awarded him extensive decorations: the Navy Cross, the service's second-highest award for valor, 3 Silver Stars, a Bronze Star, 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 4 Air Medals. The citations detailed his aggressive leadership, his exceptional gunnery, his courage under fire. But the decorations couldn't capture what Fleming had actually accomplished. He had done exactly what the Navy trained him to do. He had exploited the advantages American technology and American training provided. He had led other pilots effectively. He had killed the enemy with mechanical efficiency. And he had survived. In a war where survival itself was an achievement, Fleming had not only survived but excelled. The Navy sent Fleming to Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland, the Navy's test pilot center. After 30 days of leave, where he met his infant daughter Erin for the first time, Fleming began work as a test pilot, evaluating new aircraft and weapon systems. The war in the Pacific continued through the spring and summer of 1945. American forces were closing on Japan itself. Okinawa fell after brutal fighting. Plans were being finalized for Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese home islands, scheduled for November. Then, in August, atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was over. Fleming's combat career had lasted 3.5 months. His total aerial victories numbered 19. His contribution to the war effort was measured not just in kills, but in missions flown, formations led, pilots trained, and professional excellence demonstrated. After the war, Fleming remained in the Navy briefly. He served on the carrier USS Boxer as a squadron commander. He continued test pilot work at Patuxent River. But in 1947, something unexpected happened. General Curtis LeMay, commanding the new United States Air Force Strategic Air Command, personally recruited Fleming to transfer services. LeMay was building SAC into America's primary nuclear deterrent force. He needed the best pilots available. Fleming's combat record, his test pilot experience, and his demonstrated leadership made him exactly what LeMay wanted. Fleming accepted. He resigned his Navy commission and accepted a lieutenant colonel's commission in the United States Air Force. The transition was unusual, but not unprecedented. Several naval aviators transferred to the Air Force after World War II. Fleming brought his naval aviation perspective to Strategic Air Command bomber operations. He flew the first jet fighters, the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star and the Republic F-84 Thunderjet. He participated in early jet testing. He even flew the Bell X-1, the same aircraft Chuck Yeager used to break the sound barrier. Fleming became an expert on long-range strategic bombing operations. He helped develop procedures for intercontinental bomber missions. He flew early versions of the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. And in the early 1950s, he became one of the first pilots to fly the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress. The B-52 represented Strategic Air Command's future, a massive 8-engine jet bomber capable of carrying nuclear weapons to any target on Earth. The aircraft was revolutionary in its capabilities, but also in its complexity. Early B-52 seconds had numerous technical issues. Test pilots like Fleming worked to identify problems and develop solutions before the aircraft entered operational service. February 16, 1956. Exactly 11 years after Fleming's greatest day of aerial combat. He was leading a routine B-52 training flight as part of the 93rd Bomb Wing based at Castle Air Force Base, California. The mission called for high-altitude navigation training and crew proficiency work. Fleming's B-52, tail number 53-0384, took off at 10:34 in the morning. The flight proceeded normally for almost 7 hours. The B-52 cruised at 38,000 feet over California. Then, at approximately 5:30 in the afternoon, the aircraft's right forward alternator failed. Electrical power is generated from 4 separate alternators on the B-52. Losing one was not immediately catastrophic, but then the other 3 alternators failed in rapid succession. Total electrical failure at 38,000 feet. The crew compartment depressurized, emergency oxygen masks deployed. The B-52 began to lose altitude. Fleming tried to restart the electrical system. Nothing worked. The bomber was dying. At 17,000 feet, Fleming gave the order to bail out. The procedure for bailing out of a B-52 required coordination and timing. The crew had practiced emergency egress repeatedly, but practicing on the ground was different from executing in a depressurizing aircraft at high altitude. Fleming, as aircraft commander, remained at the controls to give his crew time to escape. He would bail out last. 4 crew members successfully ejected and parachuted safely to Earth. Fleming pulled the ejection handle. The explosive charges fired. The seat rocketed upward through the canopy. Fleming separated from the seat and his parachute deployed, but something went wrong. The parachute caught fire, possibly from friction during deployment or from contact with the burning aircraft. Burning parachute silk collapsed. Fleming fell helplessly toward the ground. He died on impact. The first B-52 Stratofortress to crash in the aircraft's operational history killed Patrick Dawson Fleming, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, the fourth-ranking Navy ace of World War II. Test pilot, Strategic Air Command officer. He was 38 years old. He had survived 3.5 months of intense aerial combat over the Pacific. He had destroyed 19 enemy aircraft. He had been shot at by hundreds of Japanese fighters and countless anti-aircraft guns, and he died in a training accident over California. The funeral was held with full military honors. Fleming was buried at Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, California. The graveside service included a flyover by fighter aircraft, the American flag draped over his coffin. The service that the young man from Montgomery who pumped gasoline had given to his country was recognized and honored. Fleming's story reveals truths about warfare, about American military effectiveness, and about the men who fought World War II. He wasn't born to privilege. He wasn't destined for greatness. He was an enlisted sailor who repositioned arresting hooks while dreaming of flying. He was a filling station attendant who saved nickels for flying lessons. He was a working man who wanted something more than what he'd been given. The American military system in World War II created pathways for men like Fleming. Enlisted personnel could earn commissions. Working-class kids could attend the Naval Academy. Competence mattered more than background. The system wasn't perfect. Class and privilege still provided advantages, but the system was more open than most military establishments in history. Fleming's 19 victories in 3.5 months resulted from the combination of his individual skill and the system's support. American pilot training was excellent. American aircraft were superior. American logistics were overwhelming. American tactics emphasized the strengths of American equipment while exploiting weaknesses of Japanese equipment. Fleming operated within this system and used it to maximum effect. But the system couldn't protect him from a burning parachute over California in 1956. The randomness of death in military service doesn't respect combat records or decorations. Fleming survived the most dangerous flying imaginable, carrier aviation in combat against determined enemies, only to die in a training accident. The irony is sharp but not uncommon. Many World War II veterans survived combat only to die in peacetime accidents. Fleming left behind his wife Neville, his daughter Erin, and a combat record that placed him among the elite fighter pilots of American history. Fourth-ranking Navy ace, 19 confirmed victories. Navy Cross, 3 Silver Stars, multiple other decorations. But more importantly, he left an example of what working-class determination combined with systematic training could accomplish. The boy from Montgomery who pumped gasoline became a fighter pilot who destroyed 19 enemy aircraft in 6 missions. The enlisted sailor who manually reset arresting gear became an officer who led other pilots in combat. The anonymous working man became a recognized ace. The pathway wasn't easy. The journey took 8 years of relentless effort, but the pathway existed. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.